I don't know. I think that's the message that is like core to me, is that you are always empowered to take action in your life. And we want to pretend like it's someone else. It's political, it's the schools, it's my parents, it's always someone else that's controlling me. It's like you have so much power to shape the world that's around you and to influence that moving forward. And I think it's really powerful.
I will run, I will rise, I will grow like the world's never known.
All right, this conversation with Elena is really great. So I work with her. She's a kindred spirit. Her and I are creatives. And every conversation we have is just always so incredible. I was really excited to have her on the show, and we get into a bunch of stuff. We start off. She's an extremely talented person, and we dive into a little bit of the IoT stuff and technology that she's looking at, and then we talk a lot about Black Lives Matter and how we evolve as humans to be better individuals. So yeah, let's jump right into it.
So what's been new with you?
I have some cool AirPods too, but you can hear me fine like this.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Check. Mic check. So for me, shoot, nothing too crazy. I mean, I feel like I'm kind of getting back on a little wave of like technical creativity, solely for myself. I feel like I've been away from that for a while, where I like kind of step away from a lot of things, with the intention of just like really diving into like a technology or a project, or specifically a technology project. I've been looking at, I mean, it's also like, kind of like trying to see what kind of ideas I can come up with, and really looking at pushing what we understand IoT things to be. It's just like, it feels like a cloud. It feels like a cloud that's just hanging over, like people know that there's like, it's a thing, but it's really bringing it down to earth where it actually connects to what we do, right? And it being really, really ridiculously easy to connect it into what you do. I think that part is way, we're just not focused enough on that. Yeah, we say it needs to be easy, but a lot of things that are like solutions still require you to have a certain amount of technical knowledge to install it, and that just turns everybody away. And if they have, if you even think about something as simple as like, when we had DVD players and you would put that in and it wouldn't work, well, then people just have like bad taste about technology in their mouth. So if it's not literally plug and play, it's very, very hard to get people to do it. Because I'm thinking like, I'm dedicated, and it still takes me forever to automate my home. And even then, like, I had a system that I created a long time ago that I used to turn my fan and my lights on and off. And then something happened with an update, with either a library or dependency, or just something got messed up. And I didn't even want to go back and like reprogram my stuff, because I was too lazy, and I had already, like, I straight up got my fan, I got my lamp, and I cut off the wires and hooked them into these, like, I have it right here, actually. So you see this little thing right here? So yeah. This, just a regular Pi. This right here, this part right here in the middle, this is just like something I made just to make it work. And then this is where the magic happens, the blue stuff. So I have to reprogram this to do what I wanted. And it's literally been sitting here. I have the code, I have everything. It's just so like cumbersome to do. And I even got, I'm so ashamed of it, but I was working all hard on this stuff and I couldn't find an SD card reader, a good one. I had like this really old school one and it completely like stopped me in my tracks. So I just feel sad when I get stuck like that. And then it always becomes, oh, wait, I need to buy this other thing of technology to like keep on going with the thing that I'm doing. And I'm trying to like get away from that because I already have plenty of things. I have so many odds and ends, and especially when it comes to electronics. But it's so hard when you don't have that crucial thing, because now for SD cards, those are super important because I want to flash new operating systems onto these Pis, right? But my SD card right now, my SD card reader is just malfunctioning or something. So yeah, my projects, what I started is I just took everything out and I put it on my desk. If I see it every day and it's not, and I'm not finishing it, then it's just like that little gentle reminder that I should reprogram this.
But you reminded me of a tweet I put out the other day. It said, "Nothing can be accomplished if you stop working. Just keep moving forward. Momentum is your oxygen when you're starting something new." And I think that's what you were talking about. It's that I don't think we talk about momentum enough, about how, like you said, like putting it in a place that you'll look at it. And once you start doing something, or just like you were saying, like just needing that SD card, you're like, dang. And it's not even that difficult to get it, but it's like, when you don't have it with you, it's the momentum. It's, I don't know if you watched that video that I had on the list of from Brett Victor. What is it? Oh man, I think it's Inventing on Principle, and he talks about how creators need immediate connection to their creation. And so like his whole thing is all about like building tools so that you know exactly, and he does it in programming, and then in like, you'd really love this, because then he goes and he shows how a circuit's wired, and he's like, and he does it digitally. Oh, do you remember that one?
That conversation. Yes. Okay. Yeah. No, that guy was incredible because, first of all,
I love that talk.
The technology that he was demoing and the way he was demoing it was like way ahead of its wave, right?
Yeah.
Like he really stressed. Like I think that's a very special moment in a lot of programmers' lives when they have the two windows open and they make the change here, especially when you're doing CSS. You see your background turn blue and you're like, oh, did my colors just turn that blue, right?
Yeah.
When we have that connection, right? And it's almost like this weird kind of like immediate. A lot of people, I mean, especially when I was in, when I was programming in college, it was like it wasn't immediate gratification, but it was like a kind of immediate gratification because every time I ran my code, it didn't work. But if I put something in new and then it didn't work, well, then I knew that it didn't work. And then I can proceed. You know what I'm saying? So like that's a very, that always takes you back to like everything will always come back to feedback loop for me, because that's exactly what programming is okay, here I put in this thing and then it comes out with this other thing, and then start basically like when you're playing the match game when you're little, and they have all those tiles and they're laid down and you flip it up and you find the tile with the orange star and you need to find the other tile with the orange star, but you remember where you saw the first tile, like just really like that very fundamental memory game is it's like, programming is like a sophisticated version of that. And that totally gets me to like thinking about school. That gets me thinking about like children who are not in school right now. And we don't know what the future looks like for them as far as learning goes, and I understand it's a very like emotional, there's a lot of things that the teacher provides that being in a community provides. So I'm very sad for kids not being able to gather like the same way that they're used to, but I'm also seeing a lot of opportunity for, I think it's especially towards older kids, right? Like high school and up, where, this transformation of being able to function digitally is I don't think that's good. That's a new asset that has come up in people. That's a new thing that people need to consider, right? It would be like we never really fully considered this as like a vector unless somebody was doing a full-time remote job, right? That it really matters how you come across digitally. And that's something that I even think about now too. When we're in meetings, you don't see everyone's face when they're in the room, and at least just nod and see them, right? And sometimes I feel like that, obviously that's missing. And so I'm finding myself like, at first I really liked to just not have my camera on and just be muted. And then like you think it's very efficient just to only speak when you have something like to say or whatever. But whenever I have my video on, you can see people's face. That's a whole part of our brain that is very, very, very evolved and developed, that we're separated from that. So being able to try to, bring that back into this digital space, I think is like super important. But I mean, with kids, it's them meeting up in person and having those things. I feel like that's something hard, super hard to try and replace.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's one of the difficulties that my kids are having right now, is that they're needing that, like as a human, and especially for them, like evolving, they need that interaction to figure out how to function as in a society, right? Like it really does help us, and I think that is a difficult part. But I do want to. I don't know. I think we've talked about this before, but there's also the flip side of what we're talking about, is that because of everything being digital, there becomes a new opportunity for kids to recognize when they're getting value and when they're not, which they didn't have before. And this is what I told you about my son. When he's a good kid, he's in class, he's paying attention, but now that there was remote, he didn't even go to any of the the Google meetups, because he's like, when I talked to him, his teacher's like, he hasn't been to any of them in the past, 4 weeks. And we're like, what's been going on? He's like, it didn't add value. It's not what he said, but when it came down to it, he's just like, it didn't help me in doing my work. So he'd go and do his work, and then he'd read. So he read 12 books over the amount of quarantine, instead of being in class, that like, he didn't need that. And he would have never been able, if he was physically in a class, he never would have gotten up and gone and sat down at his desk. But because it was a digital realm, he in fifth grade could say, this doesn't add value. I'm just going to go do my homework, and then I'm going to go read. And I thought, and I think it's really interesting that at a young age, being able to differentiate when there's value being had and when there's not. Because even, I know people say this a lot of times, it's so much easier to do digital, but harder to do in person. They're like, if I show up and in the first 5 minutes, I'm not getting, what I need, and I feel like it's not a value to me, then I'll leave a meeting. And that's so much easier to do digitally than it is physically. When you're there, to get up and leave, it's like, oh, is that something I said? But when you just drop, it's like, they just keep talking.
You must have lost internet connection.
Yeah. So I see what you're saying. There's two sides to it. And I think there's pros and cons on both sides that help us validate what real value is, that help us, determine in a new way that we didn't have in a physical sense. And so it's, I think there's pros and cons on both sides. I think we need to, I don't want to lose track of both. I think both sides could demonize the other, right? It's like everything should be in person or everything should be digital. It's like the fact that we have to blend the two. I think it's forcing us to understand the digital side, the pros of the digital side for the next, year and a half. And when we go back to meeting in physical, that'll help us all kind of like digitally evolve and mature. So I think it's, I had never thought about it until you brought that up. It's kind of interesting.
And this is making me think of like the book that I'm reading, by a Buddhist monk, that it talks about communication, and that he says a line in there that really struck me. And he was saying that it doesn't matter if you have a phone and if you're if you're sending tweets, if you're posting Instagram posts, if you're texting each other, he was like, even if you have this instrument and you're participating in an exchange of words or pictures or whatever it is, that doesn't make you a better communicator. And I was like, just because you're doing this thing that is perceived as communication does not make you a good communicator. And that, I think that's a key thing that everybody should understand for both the in-person and the digital side, right? So, I mean, really, he was saying, whenever you look at your phone and you're about to send a message, take a deep breath in and tell yourself that you're using this as an instrument of compassion, so that when you're actually responding, when you're writing, when you're communicating with somebody, that it actually has like meat and potatoes in it, right? Like there's meaning in there. I'm not just saying, responding like LOL. Like, why would I just respond? I mean, I get like, okay, sometimes that's appropriate depending on like, the course of the conversation, but I think that we do, convolute the fact that, no, we've been texting all day. Like, what do you mean we're not talking? Well, we have been texting all day, but about nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that also, makes you question the quality of the things that you're saying, because now we do it in such a massive amount, right? I have this thought, I tweet it, and I just have so much to say, right? But really, am I making what I have to say more concise? Am I giving it that power? And instead of saying 100 things in one day, I can just say one thing that really packed the meaning of those 100 smaller things, right? So it makes you really think about what it is that you're saying and when you're saying it. For me, I think reading that book about communication was that, like, it made me want to talk less, which is very, very funny, because you think, a communication book is about you talking more. And I was like, no, I need to listen more. I need to listen more. Because in a conversation, if you're saying something to me, I'm like, oh, what's my response to this? What do I even think about this? So let me just say something real quick. But if I literally just sit there and I'm quiet, and you go off on a topic, I can like literally take it in and then say something that I think is important and something that I've really processed. Like, cutting out that fluff in your general conversations too, especially digitally. There's a lot of fluff. I think fluff is even more in digital conversations than they were in person-to-person conversations, right? That was something that was very interesting to me about communication.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. I think that's really powerful. It's I don't even know if this is true, but I heard it in, I don't know, one of the books that I was reading. But it might not have been true, but it was that idea that Abraham Lincoln was sending that letter, and he said, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long letter.
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of exactly what you're saying, is like the ability to like to really be concise requires your mind to operate in a different way than just a knee-jerk reaction. It requires a lot of attention and thoughtfulness and listening. I think that's one of the things I've been thinking about a lot too, is because I love talking. Like I'm realizing over the last year, I've always said that I was an introvert, and now I'm realizing I'm really not an introvert. I'm an extrovert. I do really enjoy communication, but what I'm realizing is that I'm really fascinated in people. That's why everything that I start like evolves around how I think and how other people think, and wanting to challenge my assumptions. And the only way I could do that is like listening, like, how are you doing it? And then like me talking over them, like I know nothing. The more I realize, the more I learn, the more I realize I know nothing. And so I'm interested in what other people have to say, and then processing that and going, okay, what parts do I keep? What parts do I discard? And but that process of really actively listening I think that's what I've been saying, you know, with a lot of the stuff kind of going on, is like, I feel like I'm really actively listening to what people are trying to say, and not waiting to speak, but hearing what's being said.
So in the book, they talk about like compassionate, like if you're compassionately listening, because there's a whole section about, especially about work, and you know how sometimes we tend to have conversations that are full of opinion, or you know, perceptions and things like that, that if we don't listen compassionately, that those things can bring us down. You know what I'm saying? And when you hear something that you know that that's not the kind of conversation that you want to engage in, that if you're understanding, like you're listening compassionately, you're understanding that that's, maybe they're saying this thing and it's not the best thing, but you don't want to engage with that thing because that's just not the energy that you want to put off. It talked about communication as food, right? It said what you think of all your senses, right? We think of food as just what we eat, right? What comes into our body. But it's things that you see, things that you hear, things that you smell, things that you feel. That's all like within the umbrella of communication, right? We have nonverbal communication. We have like stank faces that we could give people. Like we have a lot of different things that we do to communicate, and to think that it's only words is a selling communication short, right? So really understanding that, and they were saying like your communication is like food. And so you need to be aware of everything that's coming in. If I'm driving down the road and I see a billboard of some hate, like a hate billboard, right? I'm subject to that communication, even though that's not what I believe in necessarily, right? So I think there's a practice too of being able to understand and see things come in and let them go. Wipe off of your shoulder, pass under the bridge, and choose to not engage with it, right? Because really where we put our energy, where we engage, those are the things that come more to life. So it even makes me not want to be upset or angry at things that I don't like, because then I'm putting my energy in, I'm really focusing on the thing that I don't like, even though I just said I don't like it, right? So then that makes you think like hate is a very like obsessive version of love. People hate, but they're kind of in love with that thing because they can't stop talking about it. They can't stop hating it. But you really kind of love it. You love to hate it. It's very weird, right? And so I think it's when people get these obsessive, like, you know, and you go into like a knee-jerk reaction. I think, you know, us becoming better listeners is so important for everything that we're doing right now. Like, and not listening just blindly and taking what they say, but like you said, what do you want to keep? What do you discard? Is this the truth? People say stuff all the time now, and it's just even more, you know, media, more, you know, an article that looks legit because it's printed on a website, but is it the truth, right? So we have this also problem with like groupthink and the quality of the things that we're saying and the quality of the things that we're sharing.
Yeah, and one of the things you talked about is like when you talk about, is this true or not? I think that's one of the things that's really interesting to me, is that I think truth is more relative than I've ever thought it was, right? It's like, and I think that's one of the things about the education and the school is like we leave high school or college having spent, you know, 12 or however many years, you know, at it in college, being told, you know, that there's a right and wrong. And then you get into the real world and you realize that there's a ton of gray. And I think that's, it goes back to like a lot of different things, but I wanted to, I feel like I'm kind of getting off of the topic of what you're talking about of like listening. And one of the things that I wanted to bring back and say why it's so important is that, you know, to take out the word truth and just say perspective, I think is is really what I find myself doing a lot. Is one of the things I talked about in my kind of response to everything going on with Black Lives Matter. I think we talked about this too. Is, you know, I was saying, like, I I was putting out, you know, just listening to people's stories, like firsthand account of their experience as a Black American, and then I'd, you know, like, you know, share it, and had conversations. In my immediate reaction when I read the words like, yes, but all lives matter, my immediate reaction was like, well, I just want to ignore those people. And in my response, I was saying, like, that's not actually helping anything, especially for me, you know, being a white male. Like, when I'm saying, like, I'm listening, I have to also listen to these people. And this is, I think, like, inside of like a bit of what you're talking about, is like listening to what I don't want to hear. Like, I was already like, dude, you don't get it. I don't want to have this conversation. And I needed to push past that and hear what they had to say, because they have their own perspective on why they feel that way. And I get that, like, I don't agree with what they're saying, but I need, if I'm gonna like say this, and I want them to hear what I'm saying, like, I need to hear, why did they feel that they need to say that? Like, what's behind that too? And it's this weird like nuance. It's, I don't know, it's interesting. But I found myself doing that, as like, because Oscar was talking about this too, how the technology, it creates these algorithms that only feeds us what we want to hear, and we need to, you know, going back to knee-jerk reactions, my initial reaction was like, I don't want to listen to them, and that was a, you know, kind of a notification to me of like, I need to listen to this, because I need to hear this perspective. I don't have to accept it, but I want to listen to it and be open to accepting any part of it. It doesn't have to be the whole thing, but you can take out pieces, understand where they're coming from. And that to me is like what true conversation is like, really, it is more about listening, kind of like going back to what you're saying. That's the power, is in the understand happens when you actually hear what people have to say.
You know how, like, things always go back to just like math and physics for me, and what
that's why I like you. You know, it's just like, it sounds like math.
What I think about right now is just literal, like, law of physics, equal and opposite reaction, right? Like, in some ways, things don't exist unless that opposition exists. And I think that's a very, very crazy thing to try and wrap your head around, right? Simple example, right? I wouldn't know that there's light unless there was darkness, right? If I light a candle out in the street in the sun right now, my candle is not emitting any light to anything. It's actually it just probably doesn't even look like it's on. It probably just, why do I have a candle outside, right? But if I take that same candle into a dark closet, suddenly there's this big orb of energy, right? Suddenly you can see where the light ends and the dark starts, right? So it's imperative that when we have an idea, a belief, an understanding, a perception, right? What is pressing up against that? What is opposing? What is resisting that? What is the other perceptions to that thing? Because those things that resist it and oppose it almost make what you're believing and perceiving to be more true in a way, because now you can see it. And I mean, light would be the easiest metaphor to shape that. But really, if we take it back to Black Lives Matter, right? If I'm saying all lives matter, then that's like the same thing as me like putting that candle out in the light, because now I want my light of Black Lives Matter to be shining, right? But now they're just saying, well, all lives matter. It's light on light. So I'm not making that differentiation that needs to be made. But if I take that candle, Black Lives Matter, into a dark room, right, then I can actually see what it is that's there because of all that opposition, right? So it's two ways. It's really two ways, because that opposition teaches you a lot. It teaches you a lot. And I think for me, one thing that I particularly like technology, right? Like, I'm a super huge blockchain fan. And one of my favorite things is to talk to somebody who doesn't like blockchain. Because I love it, right? So I'm like, tell me why you don't like it. I want to know why you don't like it. What do you think is wrong with it? Because you're probably right, first of all, that there's an issue, or you're seeing something that I'm not seeing, or I have a chance right now to show you, explain to you, teach you why your original perception isn't correct, right? So and those are hard conversations to have. Like, it's easy for me to talk about the technology because it's kind of like an objective thing, right? Like, they might not like it because of whatever, but it's still very objective. And it's when we have these conversations like Black Lives Matter that are emotional, that deal with people's lives, with people getting killed, with systematic, like, oppression, things that affect generations of people. That is wild to me. People can be ugly to people for generations and push this on for generations. And we are very emotionally fired up in these conversations that we can't have that objective. That conversation is very, very hard to have. And a lot of those conversations need to be had. They need to be had. And so it's taking a lot of strength of people who have enough courage to speak up right now and really try and untie these knots that have been so forcefully tied together. It's a very delicate balance, for sure. Hearing that other side is very important. Always very important, but I think, not to focus on it too much. Definitely welcome it. Like, embrace that opposition and try to understand it, but don't let it pull you down from what it is, like, inside that you believe in and that you're pushing towards. It doesn't mean that your mind can't be changed. It just means that, like, you're practicing listening and you're practicing respecting other people's truths, their perspectives, their reality. It's their truth. It's to them, it's their truth, right? Truth is relative. Truth is extremely relative. There's no I don't think it would ever be possible to obtain the truth always, all the time, because it's different for each human being.
Yeah, I think one of the things you made me think of that's really interesting is when you talk about dwelling on things, and how when we focus on it, sometimes that can be can have negative impacts. Like, we just keep talking and focusing on the thing instead of, like, moving forward.
Right.
I think what I'm hoping is happening right now is, and I think it's just like, kind of goes back to what you talked about. It's the systematic corruption. I don't know if corruption is the right word, but the erosion of it's the exposure to the errors in our system. And when you look back, I like Philip has talked about how the parallel between 9/11 happening, and we changed our system, and like, it's not like the security checks and the TSA is like the best thing, and they keep trying to, like, make, you have clear and you have new solutions that are trying to evolve. But, like, when that happened, it was like, hey, this system is like, we need to put stuff in place so that this stuff doesn't happen. And I'm hoping that this has gotten so loud and so in our face that we can't the only thing we can do is start to break apart and reconstruct the system. It's not going to be perfect overnight. I get that, but just like 9/11 was an instance where we took a stand and we changed infrastructure to help us move forward, to create a base to move on. I hope that that's what's going on right now in each of us individually, but then at a larger scale. We're all citizens of this land, and I hope that we have to acknowledge that there are very large flaws in the system that we have, and that's what we need to address. We need to put in those checks that can help us alleviate like you were saying, the generational things that have kept a whole group of people from what I would think is just the general opportunities that we have. Like, and I don't know that people really get that. Yes, all lives matter. No one's arguing that. We're arguing that because all lives matter, this group of people that has not gotten the attention and has been overlooked purposefully through the systems, that needs to be addressed. Because all lives matter, we're saying Black Lives Matter. And like, I don't know people getting the nuance of that, right? Like,
yeah, and it's very odd to me to say. I mean, hearing all lives matter by itself, that makes sense, right? But when it's put up against, and they're using it as a way to oppose that Black Lives Matter. Now that doesn't make sense anymore, right? Because what they're doing, like, if I were to draw, right, and then I have like all lives matter. In my box, right? Can you see it? I can't see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I see it.
So then inside of it, there's a problem, all right? And then that's Black Lives Matter. Right? So we are pinpointing the problem and saying, y'all are everyone's killing Black people. They matter. We should stop killing them, right? But then they're trying to zoom out this scope and be like, well, all lives matter. But that doesn't make, like, for them, their logic is so flawed in saying that as a retort, because they're trying to just spread the scope to a bigger scope. But in reality, that's not going to help the problem, right? Because you don't, when there is a fire in your house, right? I go to the room, to the place, to the source of the fire and try to extinguish it, right? That's the problem. I don't go and start, well, let me just make sure the other rooms are good. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's a funny analogy.
Is clearly on fire. So go to the specific room, and in this case, it is Black lives. Yes, okay, all lives matter. But it's obvious right now that Black lives are the most endangered. People are being lynched. It's sick because now, when you say all lives matter and you take the media focus away from the protests that are still happening, you take the media away from trans Black women that are still being killed daily. You're not being realistic with yourself, and you're not looking at the problem. And looking at the problem, addressing the problem, finding the problem is step one all the time. And so people are trying to make us take steps back and be like, well, I don't see the problem because I zoomed out to all lives. So I don't know what you're talking about. Well, bro, zoom back in, because there's a lot of death over here, and it's sad and it's terrible and it's unexcusable. Like, why do people insist on that fundamental? I understand the idea of fundamentalism and going back to a better place, but there's a reason that time moves forward all the time, right? You can't stop it. We have to continue forward. T is continuing in the positive access always. So we acknowledge the past, right? There it is. Look at the past. We had slaves. Terrible. Okay, acknowledge it. And even if that's your heritage, whatever, right? Like the president wants to have statue gardens of statues that are getting pulled down now because we look back in time, look back on ourselves and are looking in the mirror and popping that pimple and trying to get it out. And he's like, well, I really liked all those pimples. Let's just like collect them in a statue garden of slave holders. You can't, it can't be like that, you know? And it's just a shame that, you know, the place that I grew up in, that this world, America, you know, I grew up seeing people of all religions, all colors in our streets, in our restaurants, and in our homes everywhere. But then at the same time, you know, saying, well, you know, but we're just like gonna be separated from everybody else because we're better. Well, I'm like, well, how did that? We're literally a combination of everything. We can't now say, well, we're going to take this special group of people and not want to be a place where people come for refuge anymore. We're literally built off of refuge. People came here for a better life. That's at least what they teach you in the books, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to have these, so hard to have these conversations. Typically, I mean, you and I will stay talking about, you know, cool technologies, and I mean, still people, still world, still human things, but these type of human problems that we have like really hurt my heart, you know? It's a matter of us evolving into a stronger race, really, because we're killing part of ourselves off. We're trying to kill off Black people. It's terrible. I don't understand.
Yeah. But I think coming back to like, I know we talked about like fixing systems. I think one of the things that I think about a lot too is I think the core pillar of success is about creating successful habits. And so when all this stuff started happening, my reaction started going to, what are the things that I can put in? What are the infrastructure that I can put in place so that I don't go back to sleep? Right. And so like one of the first obvious ones is like, I just started a goal. I bank with Simple. And so they have a way to be able to just like have expenses come out. So every paycheck I put money aside, and every month I was going to donate to Black Lives Matter. Right. So like, I just set that up of like, that's step one. Well, step one was like starting to listen to people. And then step two was like, every month I'm contributing. Like, I'm not going to do a big thing up front. It's just, I wanted to create things that, like you were saying, like, you know, the very first of this started with you putting something so that you'd see it on a regular basis and remind yourself the action you need to take.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to, at least for me, I think that it's important that we start doing that as an individual and not only being, for sure we need to do work on a systematic, on like a civil level, so that we as common people can address the laws that govern us. But at the same time, while that's happening, they can happen in parallel. I need to be taking actions that help me to continue to think about this and not let it fade in the back, because I mean, this has all been there. It's not like this started happening. Like, that's the big thing to me, is that when I say I woke up, it's that it wasn't like this just started in, the last 5 years. It was always there, but it wasn't in my face. So how do I keep it in my face so that change continues to happen? And I think that there's things that we could do as individuals. And like I said, like setting those things up, taking those knee-jerk reactions of like, I didn't want to listen to these people because I just think that they're, not in the right place, and being able to like turn that in me and go, okay, I'm going to listen to them. Those things I think are far more important than we realize. And I hope that people start to realize that, I don't know, I think that's the message that is like core to me, is that you are always empowered to take action in your life. And we want to pretend like it's someone else. It's political, it's the schools, it's my parents, it's always someone else that's controlling me. It's like, you have so much power to shape the world that's around you and to influence that moving forward. And I think it's really powerful.
So think about this. Think about, okay, one thing that we always touch on that maybe I think probably a core thing that we always talk about, me and you, is change. Changes very, 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 very important. I think that we are scared of change. We don't know, because what does change mean, right? It means I'm here, there's a change, and I'm different now over here, right? And we don't know what that looks like all the time, so that's scary. Going to a place we don't know, scary, right? But change is super necessary when you are creating. You can't have creation without change, right? You start with a blank piece of paper and you change it. You don't, change doesn't mean good or bad. It feels bad, maybe. We perceive it to be bad. Oh, that, people, oh yeah, I loved them, but then they changed. Okay, well, you probably stayed in the same spot and that person went forward, and now you're so sad with yourself because you didn't change too. You didn't keep going too, right? And so, first of all, normalizing change and understanding that it's not a bad thing, because we aren't perfect. And if we aren't accepting change, then we can't even approach perfect, right? Like, not accepting change is like having your life on the pause button forever. You graduate high school, you walk the stage, and you're that thing forever. Weird, right? I don't know why we do that. Like, oh, you haven't changed. Well, man, that might even be an insult now, right?
Yeah.
Like, I hope I've changed. I hope I've become a better person. Yeah. No, changes. I think that's key, right? And it's really and that's me and you with creation. You change it from whatever it was to something else. And that energy that you put in there, like, it lives on into the change. And it could be good or bad. You could have formed a bad habit or a new good habit, right? But really being able to make that change, if that's not exactly what you perceived it to be or wanted it to be, that maybe you can even go back. You know what I mean? Like, giving ourselves that flexibility to say, I'm going forward, I'm going left. Okay, I didn't like going left, I'm coming back to the center. Oh, and now I'm going right. I really like going right. Let me go right a lot. You know what I mean? Like, whatever the case may be, change is super necessary and fundamental to creation, right? And I think a place that we can start is like exactly what you're saying. People think that they have to, like, kind of wait for something, or life is happening to them, when it's inside going out, right? And if we do this enough, inside coming out, and that collective of people making the, like, positive changes, like you, that monthly contribution, when 100 people make that same monthly contribution, well, now we're making a change. Your pocket change is becoming real change, right?
Yeah. I also think it's important I think we use change and we mean impact. And I think they're two different things. Change just means it's altered, whereas impact, I feel like, there's a deeper meaning, is that there's this that's evolved to a better state, right?
Right.
And I think, and so to me, like, where my mind goes is change in the sense of, how do I put things in place so that my magazine, I think, is like a prime example. I started this thing 6 years ago with the idea that I was going to do it for at least the next 10 years. Like, when you start thinking in those terms of not what's going to happen, this week or next week, but like, this thing that I'm doing will be part of what I do for the next 10 years, is very interesting. and your mind shifts to the changes that you want to make are towards the impact that you want to have, right? And I think that that's really key. Is it's not just like change for change's sake. I think, like you were saying, is non. It's just descriptive of moving forward, of altering something. Whereas when really the word that you were really talking about was that evolution, that it's more than change. It's that deeper shift inside of you that has that long impact. I think that distinction, I think, is really important for people to kind of showcase that.
I think something that benefits me is when I imagine like my life, and I'm looking into the future, and I'm seeing where I believe like I could be, where I want to be, where I think I need to be, right? But also tracking that future self back to a million small things that I do in between, right? That's very, like, it's so important to have that long term goal, but simultaneously having those short term goals, right? And I think that that's like this duality that we have to we have to balance it, right? Because sometimes if we have too much weight on what we perceive that where we need to be, that can also break your heart. If you were like, yeah, I'm gonna buy a house in 2 years, or I'm gonna have enough money to buy a house in 2 years, and then the 2 years comes and you had so and so, accidents or whatever, and you couldn't accumulate what it was that you thought you needed or that you thought you should have by then people start getting sad. But then if you don't account for all those little wins that you made along the way, maybe you didn't get to that specific goal, but now you're 10 times closer than where you were before, right? So appreciating, like, man, the magic of every day is it's astounding, right? Like what I can do today. And I think that's something that you've really unlocked in yourself, is what you do today, what you do every day, what you consistently do every day becomes who you are in the future, right? And so having those good habits, having those things that you can rely on, that have served you well in the past, as far as like personal growth goes, I mean, keep doing it. Like, keep doing those things. They say like it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. That's it. Every day for 10 years, I pushed myself a little bit. I pushed the needle a little bit further. And one day it just happens. And when we forget, when we stop telling ourselves to go in this direction, or make that your day is not worth anything, that's when we start getting in a struggle, or when you're just trying to survive the day, or when the day is happening to you, right? You need to happen to the day. The day shouldn't be happening to you, because then, but some people exist like that too. And maybe they're very happy. I'm not saying not to be mindful of your present moment and not to be flexible. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that you have intention. That intention new every day.
I think you really hit on something that I've been thinking about a lot. That duality. I wrote about this in volume 33, of how incredible it is that you can simultaneously be happy and sad at the same time. Was like, it's just kind of fascinating to me, like that duality. That in and of itself, like when you talk about that, is kind of interesting. But what you were talking about, I think, is because I'm looking at, one of my big things is looking at people who are successful, are intentional with their time. So how do they create the life that they wanted, right? And when you talk about the duality of the here and now, and the things that I'm doing today, and the vision of where I want to go, the really fascinating thing is when you talk about the two are actually like linked.
Mm-hmm.
That you're as you make these changes here, like in the day to day, and this goes. If you watch Gary Vee, he talks about clouds and dirt, and it's like one of the things that is like fundamental to what I really love what he says. But that you focus on like the vision of where you're going, and then you get back in the dirt, and then you just do, and the process of doing alters your vision, right? It's like it's not like that thing is set in like in 10 years this is what it's going to be. It's like this is where I'm going, but as I'm working, it's uncovering, right? That change, that daily change goes back to that vision of where you're going, and it's like, oh, I have new information. How am I going to deal with this? Because that alters where I'm going. So like you simultaneously live in the two, and I feel like that's a lot of the successful people that I'm kind of like when I'm looking at like what makes them successful, it's their ability to live between the two worlds of everyday action matching the vision, and the two kind of link together, and everything in between they just kind of like push to the side. Like that's the sludge that you don't worry about, and it's like the dirt and the vision, and
time
then
time makes us collapse on each other.
Well, we should probably, I don't know, you have more to say? I feel like it's already been an hour. We should probably start winding down.
Talk forever.
I know. Well, we really hit on some really good stuff. I thought it was pretty good.
I mean, it was good. I feel like we had some more juicy conversations before, but that was the one.
Oh man. I thought there was some good gems. There's some good gems. It's always fun talking with you because you're this very interesting person that seems very unique in your ability to live in multiple worlds at once. And I think that's why I get along with you, is that titles are very difficult for me because I don't feel like there's one that describes me, but they all are a collection of like what I do. And you're the same way, like you're super creative and have this incredible mind, but then you're also ultra technical in multiple things. Like, there's not a lot of people that are able to, and then you do all this music, like you just have so many facets that, of expressing what's in you, ways for it to come out. I think that's what I really enjoy about our conversations, is that because of that background, it allows you to make connections that a lot of people wouldn't see because they don't have that detail that you do. So it's always fun, chatting with you. It pushes me.
That definitely like wraps it. I mean, that takes us back to the original point of like what we were even making in the conversation, is that you need to people need to listen to each other. You need to listen to people you don't like what they're saying, and you need to listen to people that you do like what they're saying, because really people are perspective, right? The more people, the more perspective. The more people you listen to, the wider your own perspective can become. The more you are able to understand what reality is, right? And so to think that you function as a single being and that everything that you think of comes out of just your mind alone, well, sure, you can do that, but you're limited. Your scope is very small. You decided that you're going to function off of a very small box. But for me, something that I've always I have a very strong personal a sense of myself, like a very strong sense of myself, right?
Yeah.
But because of that, I think that's why I'm fascinated in other people's sense of themselves too. Because you can say what you want, you can, but I still know who I am, and I think that's fundamental to people who create, right? When you're creating your stuff, I'm like, man, Mark's gonna create his stuff, and I'm gonna create my, and we're just creating, and then collectively creating towards this other thing, right? But it's okay, you're over there doing your thing, I'm over here doing my thing, but being okay that we're doing different things. that we're
Yeah.
creating in our own way, that we're perceiving in our own way. The value comes because of the way you perceive. The value comes from the way that I perceive, and then being able to combine those things together. I wish we had more of a sense of teamwork, more of a sense of community, like those are ultra powerful, like so powerful. Like individuals are powerful, but communities will always be more powerful than the individual person. But every individual person is still very valuable. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying. Like that's like the exact reason why I started doing this idea of like evolution of one. This is my journey, talking with lots of people. And it's, again, going back to like the outcome being, I want to challenge my perspective and challenge other people's perspective in a time when we need to have more dialogue and be open to being wrong. And like, let me hear what you have to say. Let me try it on. Cause I, like, going back to what you said, I know who I am and I know how to like take the information and like, I don't know. Maybe maybe I will try this on. Maybe like I've never tried ice cream before. Yeah, I do like that, right? It's like being open to that is really powerful. And so, and then to the other thing is when it gets to the next level is like to think of the fact that I'm doing this now and I want to keep doing it to expose me and my me evolving to a better person. It's also really fascinating to like years from now to be able to look back, like think of if we could look back to like interviewing people around the time of 9/11, like what were they thinking? Like that concept of like time that you can never go back. Like think of if we could go back to when Lincoln was assassinated and having people chatting conversations and their evolution of like, well, I think it was a werewolf and like whatever the beliefs were at that time. And to see their evolution through time is like fascinating to me. So like there's this part of like me evolving, but then there's people watching other people evolve in a separate time and having new context and then helping to move forward. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's like a fractal, like exponential growth that happens when you get to the core of conversations that can be recorded. Like they couldn't, before it was like people could write books and they could impact people. Now I feel like I have so many mechanisms to record my life. And that's the power, that I think that's the core of like this evolution of one is here's my journey evolving as a human. And if it can help someone else evolve, even if it's one episode or multiple, like I feel like that's a really powerful idea.
I think it's incredibly human. Like, why are humans different than every other species on the planet? It's because we do this. It's because we do what me and you are doing, and we're like, we sit there and we look back and we're like, well, what the hell? What was that? What is it? What am I seeing in this mirror? And that is why humans exist to the level that we do now. Because do you even think about like back then, like Newton or Kepler or any of the great science and mathematical minds that existed, right? They were completely engulfed in their work, right? That was their entire life. And today people make things that leverage this person's entire life. And it's just a tiny component of a thing we do now. Just very, very, very small. Yeah, we made a commercial shuttle and sent people into space. But it was because we remembered, we looked back, you look back on that evolution. And back then, dude, it happened slow. It happened over it was an entire person's lifetime to be like, here's this one new formula. And then the generation that came after was like, well, we used that formula. We came up with like 10 more. And then the next generation comes and we're like, bro, calculus is now, we can create anything. Here is the Golden Gate Bridge. Here you go. Thank calculus. Okay. And the way that we aggregate this stuff and stack it up together, it's human. That is what makes us human. And the moment we stop doing that is when we will die. And I think what we're experiencing right now more than anything is growing freaking pains. As an entire world, as an entire society, as a human family, growing pains, right? We have totally maxed out everything that we have ever had before in every way. The way we understand, what we can read, what we consume, the way we communicate, everything we have maxed it all out. Things are breaking, and we are clawing to rebuild, to say, okay, the stuff that we need to intake from the feedback we're getting is more feedback than we've ever had in our entire life. But as always, we will take that and go forward. Be better. Be better.
And it's interesting because when you say we, it's not like we is a collective we.
Yeah.
You can take it and do what you want. I'm going to take it and do what I want. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the cool thing, is that it's not just like a we is like government that does something and they're going to decide what happens. Is like, we are all agents that are able to decide. And that's the power, right? That's the, and that, I guess that goes back to like, that's the core of the human. Like, I really like that. I gotta close this off though.
Yeah, no, do it. I think we hit it right there at the end, just a little.
I know, that was so good. You came in hard at the end. When the moment we stop doing that,
that's my
die. That's gonna be the intro.
Anymore, let me tell you how I really feel.
No, that was really good. All right.
You know what?
For your time.
I'm super pumped up. I'm about to I don't know. I'm about to do something great. I don't know what it is, but it's gonna happen.
Amen. Dude, I agree with that. I am 100% guaranteed that you are on to, doing some really incredible things, because, and I think this is where we're like, where we connect and where we like understand each other, is that your mindset and your approach, all those things you have, like that core, it's like we see each other and we're like, yeah, they're doing it. You can see when you've uncovered it, when you've like woken up, gotten out of the matrix, and you see someone else and you're like, yep, they have to. And it's like, it's this really cool like camaraderie of like, let's go evolve together, like help other people wake up. So it's really cool.
And everybody can do this, and they'll be so happy because you'll be yourself, and you're just your light and your energy and your love, and you just outward, and then we're all just outward, and it's just like this beautiful, that's what I want. I just want a beautiful, loving human family that we don't have to kill each other.
Amen. Yeah, I agree.